Greetings. This is Dick Bernard from Woodbury, Minnesota, and I've become an experiment. At least I'm experimenting with myself in this video. I obviously know where North Dakota is in Fargo because I grew up in North Dakota, but I also know about bad weather in North Dakota and the anticipated trip from the St. Paul area to Fargo, I think, is not going to work. So I'm going to try something brand new here, which is using my camera feature on my computer and attempting to send a YouTube video to Giuliani. As he knows, this will be the first time I've ever done this, ever. And I was also doing a PowerPoint for the first time ever. Uh, I grew up out there and 50 years ago this year graduated from Valley City State Teachers College. And back then, things like YouTube and PowerPoint and computers were things that we didn't really know anything about. I had a PowerPoint that I was going to do, and perhaps I might try to explain it in a follow-up uh, segment. I know YouTube is restricted to 10 minutes. And then with this 10-minute segment, sort of summarize why it is that I was willing to drive up to Fargo and how it is that I happened to get noticed in the first place about Muslims in North Dakota. My main point to convey to those of you who are watching this is that the only reason that I'm talking with you today is because of a single simple act of kindness 57 years ago in the Muslim community out near Ross, North Dakota, out in the far northwestern part of the state. At that point in time, I was an 8th grader. We were the first year in Ross, and a fellow 8th grader, Emmett, was his name, Emmett Omar, or his mother, I don't remember who, invited me to come out to their farm for a meal. And I drove on my bicycle perhaps 3 miles out into the country, went past the mosque that hopefully I'll be able to show you a picture of in a YouTube PowerPoint transmission, and visited the farm, had a meal, visited with the family, came back to town. Other than that, Emmett and I and perhaps 8 others were in 8th grade together, and the 7th grade was also in the same room, and my mother was our teacher. And because I was a teacher's kid, we moved a lot. I never really had a hometown. So there was really relatively few connections from one place to another during my growing up, but I always remembered that single, simple act of kindness. And in these days of bitterness and division, where attempts are made to drag people apart, the best thing that you can do is to remember the power of a simple act of kindness. If I had been in Fargo with you, that is what I would have suggested that you do during the time that I was making my presentation, would be to think in your own lives about some simple act of kindness that has impacted on you in your life history. We all have them. Oftentimes we would have more than one. If you take time to think about it, these are little acts that don't seem like a hill of beans at the beginning, but later on become very, very significant. There's another point I was going to make along with that, and that is how it happened to be that I got to be noticed in the first place, why Giuliani invited me to come to Fargo. He saw me at a meeting that I had come to, I believe in November, where I was invited to give a 5-minute talk or less. And the reason I was invited to that meeting of the Islamic Resource Group was that one of the leaders of that group had seen a blog posting I had done about the Ross Muslim community. I had done that particular blog post in early September because I had become irritated by the coverage of what was called usually the Ground Zero Mosque in New York City. So if you combine with the two events, the simple act of kindness 57 years earlier with an attempt to redress or to address the absurdity of the arguments against that mosque or whatever it was called in New York City, you have an action response, a positive action response to a negative event. Sometimes I've been around the world almost 71 years now. Sometimes the efforts we make are very negative. They're always angry, and anger is not a good way to respond to things, and at least if you want to get something done. So there's attempts to goad people into fighting about this or that or the other. Well, for me, I think if the emphasis can be placed on being kind and being courageous at addressing issues, you have a lot more opportunity or potential of succeeding in your quest for a goal. It doesn't, most people are like me. Most people are understanding. Most people want to learn more. Most people have absolutely zero problems with other denominations and races. The other thing I was going to spend some time developing, if I would have been there, was that during the 50s and the 40s when I grew up, North Dakota, like any other place, was not necessarily a very tolerant place. I happen to be Catholic. As I already said, we lived in many different places. I can come up very easily with lists of things that happened. From before I was born, cross burnings against Catholics in North Dakota, Ku Klux Klan related. Differentiations between Catholics and Protestants, where the Catholics were believed to harbor weapons for the Pope to take over the U.S. Or my own denomination teaching us that we were superior to the Lutherans. I remember in 1955, when I was going through confirmation in one North Dakota town, that a big part of the early part of the catechism was about how the Catholic Church was superior to all of the other Protestant denominations. There was a lot of time spent on this. A lot of absurd things like that happened. I would have gone into more detail if necessary. I don't talk about the American Indians at that point in time because we don't really have to. They were our discrimination of choice. This was the time before African Americans were common in North Dakota. There was no Air Force Base at Grand Forks or Fargo. I see that I'm running out of time in this particular segment. Keep kindness in mind, and also keep in mind that you have a right to address issues aggressively, but always work towards a solution. Hopefully this works. We'll see. I'll try a separate segment explaining what's on the PowerPoint in case I can transmit it. Thanks for listening.